Chapter 7. I think I might have just started screaming and never stopped, but I no longer had a mouth, or throat, or vocal cords capable of making sounds. I had 4 sets of legs. I had 2 huge pincers. I could see them, kind of. They were fractured image in my lobster eyes. I couldn't see much of the rest of me, but I could see other lobsters in the water. I was very frightened. Eat. Eat. Kill and eat. The lobster brain surfaced suddenly, bubbling up within my human awareness. It had just 2 thoughts. Eat. Eat. Kill and eat. I was getting input from senses I couldn't begin to understand. My extraordinarily long antenna felt water temperature and water current and vibrations, but I didn't know what any of it meant. My eyes were almost useless at first. They showed fractured, incredible images, with none of the colors I knew. I could see my pincers out in front of me. I could see my antenna. And behind me I could see a curved brownish blue surface with humps and bumps on it. My body, I realized with sickening sensation. That was my back. My hard shell. I could not look down to see my belly, or the hairy swimmerettes scurrying away back beneath my tail. I could see my 8 spider-like legs, but I could not feel as they propelled me suddenly. I could feel as they propelled me suddenly, scrabbling along the glass at the bottom of the tank. "Jake?" I called out. "Yeah, I'm here," he said. He sounded shaky, which was fine because I was on the verge of crying, if lobsters could cry. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, this is not my favorite morph, though." "No," I agreed. It was good being able to talk to him. I mean, you'd think you were losing your mind otherwise. "Axe?" Jake called. I feel I am hungry. This animal wants to eat," Axe answered. "Yeah, well, that's pretty normal for morphs," I said. "Most animals care about food and not much else. I don't think lobsters are exactly geniuses." "It wants to find prey," Axe said wonderingly. "I know. Who'd have figured lobsters were predators?" I said. "It's easier to deal with the predator brain than with the prey. That prey fear can be overwhelming," Jake said. I saw a lobster close by. "Is that you, Jake? Wiggle your left pincher." The left pincher did not move. I realized this lobster had a rubber band around its pincher. None of us had rubber bands. Rubber bands were not part of the lobster DNA. I saw a lobster to my left, unbanded, and another behind him. That was 3 of us. There were 6 rubber-banded lobsters floating or just sitting. "Speaking of fear," I said, "can anyone see out of the tank?" "Just shadows," Jake said. "These are pathetic eyes." "Yes, even worse than your human eyes," Axe commented. "This is really creepy," I said. "I've never had an exoskeleton before." "These pincers are most excellent, though," Axe said. I saw him opening and closing them. "Axe," Jake said, "you say you can keep track of time accurately? Start tracking." "Yes, Prince Jake," Axe said. "So far, 10 of your minutes have passed." "That much?" I was surprised. 10 minutes? The cops must have come in by now. "I was thinking the same thing," Jake said. "We better wait as long as we can. Close to the full 2 hours," I said. "Although, I really don't want to spend any more time than I have to in this creepy morph." According to Axe, an hour had passed when it happened. I felt a strange disturbance in the water. Something large had splashed in. I sensed something above me. Before I could think or react, I felt pressure on my shell. I was rising rapidly through the water, being lifted. "Jake, something has me." Sudden shock. I was out of the water. Dryness, heat. My antenna waved wildly as I tried to understand. My eyes registered nothing but bright lights and huge indistinct shadows. Something large closed my right pincer forcibly. I could not open it. Then my left. Rubber bands! I couldn't see them in this waterless environment. I was nearly blind, but I knew what had happened. Someone had picked me up and rubber banded my pincers. Then I was tumbling, sliding, rubbing against things I could tell were other lobsters. "Jake, are you in this too?" "Yeah, but don't ask me what it means. I can't see or hear very well." "Is it them? Is it controllers?" Something very cold dropped on me and slithered around my body. Ice? I felt a sensation of swinging back and forth for a while, like being on a swing. Axe? Yes, Marco, I am here too. What is happening? You got me, I said. Maybe the cops have us. Maybe the controllers have us? I don't know. Let's stay in morph as long as we can, Jake said. Maybe we'll figure it out. But if the controllers have us, the last thing we want to do is demorph. The ice seemed to be making me sleepy. Or not exactly sleepy, just slow, sluggish. I guess I kind of zoned out for a while. I didn't know how long, until I became suddenly alert and heard Axe's drowsy voice in my head saying, "We have only 7 minutes left." That jolted me. I was not about to spend the rest of my life trapped as a lobster. Okay, I am out of this morph. I don't care who sees, I yelled. Agreed, Jake said. Time's up. We have to take our chances. At least it's warmer now, I said. I tried to look around, but my antenna felt nothing in the air, and my eyes only saw meaningless, blurry gray forms. I focused on demorphing. I wondered if I could close my human eyes when Jake started to reappear. I really did not want to watch Jake and Axe demorph. Once had been enough. I would already have nightmares for a month. Here goes, I said. I began the change. But just then I again felt a sensation of pressure on my shell. My pincers came free. Someone, or something, had removed the rubber bands. And suddenly I felt a warmth billowing up around me. Steam. Oh no. Chapter 8. No! I screamed silently. I knew where it was. I was in someone's hand, about to be dropped into a pot of boiling water. No! And maybe it was because I was so desperate to scream, or maybe it was just the luck of the morph, but my human mouth was one of the first things to emerge. Small, open lips appeared in place of my lobster mouth. I didn't have normal lungs or vocal cords yet, so I couldn't make a sound. But I guess I didn't have to. I guess suddenly having lips appear on a lobster was enough to make the woman drop me. I fell. My front pinchers caught the edge of the pan. Sheer dumb luck. I hung onto the ledge of the pan as my tail curled up, inches above the boiling water in the pot. I grew rapidly, becoming a baby-sized creature, half covered with hard cuticle, half flesh. Human eyes grew in place of the useless stalk eyes. The antennas sucked back into my forehead. I heard a grinding sound as my spine reappeared inside me. With a desperate surge of energy, I tumbled over the side of the pan and landed flat on my shell back atop of the stove. I was looking up into a stove hood. I rolled away from the heat and fell. But the fall wasn't far because I was now the size of a toddler, more human than lobster. I was one nasty-looking kid, though, with 8 legs growing from my stomach and chest. My human hearing returned with shocking effect. Ah! Ah! Someone was screaming uncontrollably. My legs were back. I stood up. I looked around and saw a woman. Sort of pretty, except for the fact that her eyes were wide with terror, and she was screaming. Ah! I glanced over and saw a plastic bag filled with ice. That's how she had carried us from the supermarket. Now we were in her kitchen. Jake was already mostly human, standing with 1 foot still in the grocery bag, the 8 legs sucked into his chest. His human eyes appeared. Axe was a truly disgusting combination of andalite and lobster, but as I watched, he eliminated the last traces of crustacean. Unfortunately, this did not make the woman feel any better. Ah! It's okay, ma'am, I said. We're not going to hurt you. Calm down, ma'am, Jake said. Please calm down. Her eyes darted wildly from me to Jake to Axe. She kept screaming. Ah! Look, it's okay, I said. We're going to leave. No one is going to hurt you. You... Lobsters, she managed to say. Yeah, it is slightly weird, I'll admit, I said. But it's okay. It's just a dream. A dream? Yes, ma'am. Just a dream, Jake said reassuringly. I looked at Axe. Can you morph to human yet? We need to get out of here. I can morph again, he assured me. And he started right away. We're going to leave now, Jake said. You can wake up later, okay? But I wouldn't tell anyone about this dream. The woman shook her head violently. See, it could get you in trouble with certain people. Besides, folks would just think you're crazy. She nodded with extreme conviction. Axe was almost human. We were all dressed in our slightly ridiculous morphing outfits, but they would have to do. We headed for the door. Then I caught sight of 3 more lobsters, still in the bag of ice. I guess it was supposed to be a dinner for 6? Ma'am, I asked, do us a favor, would you please? Take those other guys down to the beach and let them go, okay? Chapter 9. Jake and I were playing video games at the mall. I was kicking his butt. He was distracted because he was eating. He was eating a big red bug with huge pinchers. I told him not to eat it. It would upset his stomach. But he just ignored me. Then, suddenly, his stomach exploded. It just exploded outward, guts flying everywhere. Everywhere. 8 huge spider legs appeared like something in him was trying to crawl out. I tried to get away, but the steam was rising. I was burning up. I tried to run, but my legs were gone, replaced by a tail that jerked and kicked. I screamed and screamed. Marco! Marco, wake up! My eyes opened very suddenly. Darkness. Someone holding on to me. I was confused. Mom? I asked. Silence. Then, no. My brain snapped back into reality. I was in my room, in my own bed. My dad was sitting on the side of the bed. He looked concerned and sad. It's just me, he said. He let go of my shoulders. I felt sweaty all over, cold sweat. I guess you had a nightmare, my father said. Yeah, I said shakily. Sorry I woke you up. I wasn't asleep, he said. I glanced at my clock. The red number showed 3:18 a.m. I didn't have to ask why my dad was awake. He often sat awake late into the night, sometimes watching TV, sometimes just staring into space. He'd been that way since my mom died. My dad looks very different from me. For one thing, he's pretty tall. He's paler than me too and has light brown eyes. My mom was Hispanic, very dark hair and eyes. Everyone says I look like her. I know it's true because sometimes when he's thinking about her, my dad will just glaze over and stare at me like I'm not even there, like I'm a picture of someone else. I'm okay now, I said. You should try to get some sleep. He nodded. Yeah, I'll do that. Look, Marco, you weren't dreaming about her, were you? No, Dad. Why? Because the first thing you said when you woke up was Mom. I guess I was confused. Do you ever dream about her, I mean? Sometimes, I admitted, but they aren't nightmares. He almost smiled. No, I guess they wouldn't be, would they? He picked up the little framed picture of my mom that I kept on my nightstand. Then he got that twisted look of sick grief I had seen on his face every day for the last 2 years. Part of me is mad when I see him that way. Part of me just wants to say, Dad, get it together. Let her go. She's dead. She doesn't want us to spend the rest of our lives mourning. But I never do say that. After a few minutes, he got up. He made some last remark about how I shouldn't be worried about boogeymen and left. I knew he would sit out in the living room alone and eventually fall asleep in his chair. I lay there in the dark and tried to get the dream out of my head, but it's hard to forget a nightmare that's true. There, it's finished. Axe held up a small mess of electrical components for all of us to see. It looked sort of like an exploded remote control, but smaller. It was the next day. We were out in the woods, grouped together, beneath a huge old oak tree. It was like a strange sort of picnic. Jake and Cassie had each brought hand tools for Axe to use. Screwdrivers, a solder gun, a battery-powered drill, a hammer, wrenches, pliers, and of course we had the electronic parts that we had stashed in the trash before the lobster incident. Rachel had brought sandwiches. I brought a 6-pack of Pepsi. It was a nice day, sunny and warm. I needed a nice day. I needed sunlight. I'd had a bad night with too little sleep. So Axe, I said, what is it? It is a distress beacon that can broadcast on Uric frequencies, he said with satisfaction. I know this is a Uric frequency. We have used it to trick them before, to send false instructions. All it needs is a Z-space transponder, Jake said wearily, rolling his eyes at me. I think Jake may have been a bit ragged out about the lobster incident, too. He seemed snappish and kind of unfocused, not at all Jake-like. And since we can't get a Z-space transponder, it's basically useless, right? Rachel said. Yes, Totally useless without the transponder. Rachel threw up her hands. Then what exactly are we doing? Jake just shrugged. Cassie settled up next to him and gave him a small little sideways hug. No one was supposed to notice, but right away Jake's harsh look mellowed a little. That wasn't doing anything for my bad mood, though. Well, I'm guessing that in about 2 centuries or so, humans will discover zero space and make transponders, whatever they are. But in the meantime, I'm going to have a sandwich. Tobias came drifting down through the branches and leaves of the trees, almost silent. He landed on the low branch of the oak. No one anywhere near here, he reported. Looks safe, at least as far as you guys are concerned. There's a golden eagle about a quarter mile south. I think I'll stay out of sight for a while and hope he goes away. Not for the first time, I realized how tough Tobias's life is. He shares all of the dangers we do, but he also has all the dangers that come from being a red-tailed hawk. Golden eagles sometimes prey on hawks. They are bigger and faster than he is. So, what's up? Tobias asked. We have a completely useless distress beacon, Rachel said. We need a transponder that probably won't be invented on this planet for a century or two. How about Chapman? Tobias said. What about Chapman? I asked. Chapman is the assistant principal at our school. He's also one of the most important controllers. I used to hate Chapman. I mean, once I knew that he was a controller and all. But then we learned that he surrendered his freedom to the Yeerks as part of the deal to keep his daughter, Melissa, safe. It's hard to hate someone for protecting their kid, even if he or she ended up being a deadly enemy. That's one of the terrible things about fighting the Yeerks. The real enemy is just the evil slug in the person's brain. The host is often totally innocent. We know that Chapman communicates with Visser 3, Tobias said. He talks to Visser 3 on the Yeerk mothership, or on the Blade ship. Wherever Visser 3 is. Doesn't that mean that Chapman's secret radio thing must have at least one of these Z-space transponders? Yes, Axe said instantly. If this controller speaks to any Yeerk ship, he would have a Z-space transponder. And Yeerk ships are all cloaked. Cloaking technology requires Z-space deflection. Jake caught my eye. That's pretty much what I figured. I smiled, despite the fact that I had a bad feeling about the way this conversation was going. How big is a Z-space thingy? Cassie asked. X held 2 of his fingers close together, indicating something the size of a pea. There would be several redundant units in any transmitter. We could take one without it being noticed. At least not right away. Rachel stood. We're not going to Chapman's house again, she said firmly. The last time we did, we almost got Melissa made into a controller. We cannot morph her cat again. Chapman is on guard now. It won't be easy this time. She realized what she said and added, not that it was exactly easy the first time. A historic first, I observed. Rachel is saying no to a mission. Rachel's right, Jake said. We can do nothing that will endanger Melissa again. So the cat is out. Also, any other plan that means major risk that Chapman will discover us. For a while, no one said anything. Finally, Axe spoke silently in our heads. I cannot ask anyone to take risks for me. You rescued me from the bottom of the ocean. You sheltered me, and my foolishness almost got Prince Jake and Marco killed yesterday. What he said surprised me a little. I guess I'd expected him to argue that we should try and help him. What if... Cassie began. We all looked at her. Yes? Jake asked. What if there is a way to get into Chapman's basement room, the secret room where he keeps the transmitter, without even going through the house, with almost no chance of getting caught? I felt my heart sink. As long as it doesn't involve anything with an exoskeleton. I meant it as a joke, but Cassie just looked at me solemnly. What? I demanded. A lobster again? How is a lobster... No, she said. Think smaller. Much smaller. Much, much smaller.